All righty. Hold on, let's have a pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Can I have a roll call, please?
Director Anderson?
Here.
Director Meyer? Here.
I can't hear.
Oh, she can't hear.
Here. I can't hear.
There we go.
I can't hear you.
Vice President Petrov? Here. And President Cuneo?
Here. Someone like to make a motion for approval of the agenda for tonight? Oh, wait, pardon me. We do not have any public comments. Would someone like to make a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. COVID mitigation plan update.
Good evening, President Cuneo, Board of Directors, Dr. Keenan. My name is Kelly Grigsby. I'm the Executive Director of Schools Programs.
And Kevin Andrew, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education and College and Career Readiness.
We're here tonight to provide an update and a request for a modification to the mitigation. Next slide, please. Our priorities remain the same: health and safety of staff, students, and visitors, creating a safe environment, and complying with state, local, and federal laws. That has not changed. Next slide, please. Our current provisions in our plan address masking, social distancing, health screening, vaccinations, contact tracing, cleaning, and reviewing and revising our plan. Next slide, please. The request we are making tonight is that we move from a mask recommended plan where it's triggered based on community transition to a completely mask optional plan where we remove the high community transmission threshold.
So we do want to talk a little bit about St. Louis County data. And so this is the most recent data from St. Louis County. You're going to notice a difference between the data from June 7th to June 20th versus the column of June 21st to July 4th. You'll see that there's two gray dots on the right-hand side. So test positivity rate is grayed out, as well as daily tests is grayed out. That's because the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services stopped tracking negative PCR test data in the middle of June, so that data is no longer available. So there's no way to know what is the positivity rate because we don't know what the overall N is. All we are getting reported is when there's a positive test. When you look at those colors of red, green, and yellow, just like a stop sign, a stoplight, red, not as good, green, good. If you look at that first indicator, rate of new cases, it's red because there are more than 8 new cases per 100,000 in St. Louis County. So the thresholds that the county has established haven't changed since they've been tracking for many months. So it's a relatively low number to move into that red category, and there's some issues with just that overall accuracy of the data now that 2 of the 7 main indicators we're just not able to track because the Department of Health and Senior Services is no longer tracking negative tests. Next slide. So a rationale for why we're bringing this to you today. So first and foremost, ESY is over. We're transitioning to the 2022-2023 school year. And so with that, we really want to make sure that we're starting the year off with a clear plan of what is the expectations for students on day one. Our students and families, especially on the technical schools, are already getting that from their sending schools, of knowing what the expectations are for day one regarding the COVID protocols. And so we want to be able to communicate that here shortly. Next piece is just that data collection changes. So the fact that the Department of Health and Senior Services is no longer collecting negative PCR results. We also, in looking at the data, hospitalization is one of those data points that we look at, but the data is for the region, not county specific. In county reporting, there's some variance from what we see on the CDC dashboard and the county dashboard, so there's a little bit of variance there. Additional factors, and this is really the bigger piece of the puzzle for us, is first the availability of therapeutics that are available to assist individuals if they do test positive for COVID-19. Second piece is the recent approval of vaccination for anyone over the age of 6 months. So as we've been looking at this, there were still populations of our students who just weren't eligible for vaccinations. Now, all students that we serve are eligible for vaccination. So that's a pretty big game changer. And the last piece is the availability of personal protective equipment like N95 masks. If you time travel back to the beginning of the pandemic, there was a period of time where it was very difficult to get N95 and KN95 masks. We're now in a situation where that's readily available. So for individuals who are concerned about transmission of COVID-19, they can absolutely acquire and wear those higher protective levels of PPE. Next slide. We also are proposing some revisions this evening to our board policy EBB. That's our communicable disease policy. So two big changes to that board policy. First is adding coronavirus to the list of common communicable diseases. So it's listed along with chickenpox, the flu, the cold, and those other common communicable diseases. Next piece is we added in language that permits the superintendent to temporarily close a school or program in the event that we do not have sufficient staff to operate due to communicable disease. It also allows us to close all the way down to the classroom level. There's one individual classroom where there's a high level of transmission in just that individual classroom. We could close that classroom on a temporary basis and then wait for those students to improve, and then we can reopen that classroom. So that was something that did not exist previously in our communicable disease policy. If you remember back in May when we were talking about some changes that we might be making, this was one of those policies of moving from temporary COVID policies to housing those key pieces and elements that matter to our ongoing existing permanent board policy. So this is just part of that puzzle. Next slide. Questions?
I have a question. On what you were just talking about, if we have to shut down the class, let's say a class of 10, 5 of them in COVID, yeah. Would they immediately go to remote learning, or what would that class do until they can come back?
Yeah, good question. Dr. Hanson. Yep. So we've already got in place those structures and pieces to support students in a virtual learning format. So we might not be able to claim attendance on those students, but it doesn't mean that we can't support those students while they're not in the classroom. So it's going to depend on, one, how many students are able to participate, but we do have all those structures in place with our alternative methods of instruction plan. So devices that can be provided to students and families, hotspots that can be provided to students and families, and our teachers become very adept now with virtual instruction. So that's something we can layer on and support students in those situations. We handle a little bit on a case-by-case basis. So there might be some variance. In some cases, it might be that, we're just going to close on the Friday and then reopen on Monday. And in those cases, it might be we're going to send some packets home and those types of materials as opposed to doing, synchronous in-person or synchronous virtual instruction.
And it also depends on the safety of the students, because if our staff is sick, we can't really have them, having them log in and do that, the virtual piece of it. Just making sure we're going to look at it on a case-by-case basis based on if there's enough staff in the classroom to supervise all the students, or if there's more issues with the students being sick. And we hope that the main piece of this will be where if you have to close a classroom for a day or two, just to kind of let things settle in and see how the kids are doing.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can definitely still do packets and pieces, and if it's available for the virtual pieces, that too. But we'll be working with each principal and with each classroom to be able to determine that.
Any other questions?
Will we continue to get updates on the mitigation plan on a regular basis in these board meetings?
So we will, at least every 6 months, we're going to be required to as we continue to receive federal funding. So the ESSER funds, that is something that's tied to it, that we have to have a plan on file, and we revisit it every 6 months. As Dr. Grigsby just said, we're going to continue to maintain our dashboard where we're tracking positive cases. Because we think that's a helpful piece for staff to inform their decision, where they know kind of what spread looks like in their building. That might impact their choice of, do I choose to wear a mask or not? And so we will still be able to provide the board with updates.
Could we get an update at a meeting in September or October, a month or two after school has started, just to hear how it's going?
Absolutely.
I have a thought that just come to mind regarding the time frame now quarantining. It's gone to 3 to 5 days. So in reference to our closing based upon students, teachers having COVID, how are we going to go about jockeying those closings if we're talking 3 to 5 days possibility of quarantine for individuals? And what conditions does it mean that if teacher or certain kids find themselves having it and the others didn't?
Yeah, so our building principals have gotten really adept at shuffling staff around to accommodate if it's an issue where we are shorter on staff than what would be considered fully staffed, to be able to cover all classrooms. So it's going to a little bit vary from case to case. Right now, the guidelines are if somebody tests positive, it's 5 days before they're able to come back. But there's inevitably weekends that are going to be in there too that can factor into that equation. So we didn't, in EBB, we did not set strict numbers to determine what will close a classroom or what might close a program. That's giving that power to the superintendent at their discretion to determine is this meet the threshold to close a classroom or close a program or close a school based off staffing needs.
We have not frequently closed classrooms we haven't closed schools, we have not closed programs frequently at all over the last 2 years, and high levels of community transmission. So I feel confident that it would only be in an emergency basis that we would have to close a classroom or program.
Any other questions? I have one question, and you may not know the answer, so I'm just curious. What was the rationale of changing the end in the middle of it? That made no sense to me. I was just wondering.
You'd have to ask the Department of Health and Senior Services why they should.
Does it make sense to you?
The only thing that makes sense to me is if they're now acknowledging that there's such a high number of home tests that are being utilized, that how useful is it to track PCR tests when people going to get a PCR test might be doing it because they already tested positive on a home test? And so is there value in that data or not? And that's the challenge with this is we've been chasing, and evolving data set
Right.
throughout.
We keep changing what we're studying.
Yeah, what is the indicator? Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Someone like to make a motion to approve all the consensual items?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. The next one, we have no specific action items. The next one on our Board of Education. Could we check on that, please? Is that the
Yeah.
correct date? I
It's
believe
not.
it should be August 9th, but I may be wrong.
It is nice, the ninth, because the eighth is
All right,
Monday.
would someone like to make a closed meeting of the Board of Education on August 9th at, Tuesday, August 9th, 7 p.m.?
So moved. Second.
Your roll call.
Director Asner?
Yes.
Director Byers? Director Fox?
Yes.
All right, would someone like to make a motion of the approval of our minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Executive action meetings. Following items were approved during the executive meeting on July 12th. Employment, resignations, retirement, salary adjustments, extra duty pay. Employment of ESY, summer program staff, summer of 2022. Termination of employment. On June 28th, the following items were approved. Employment resignations, retirement, salary adjustments, extra duty pay, 3 contract release requests, and 1 settlement. Board communications, would someone like to make a motion? I know that Mr. Miller is not here today. Of that, well in advance and had submitted some information that he would like to have at our next meeting. Someone like to make a motion to excuse him.
So moved.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any specific board communications? Calendar of events we can read. Everyone may have 3 to 5 minutes if you want to take a quick break, and then we will go into executive meeting. Thank you.
Oh,
Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
5 minutes?